Hey, so the goal of today's class is to talk a little bit about, well, it's really about variables and like how can we use variables, where can we see variables, and like what kind of errors might I have when I'm using variables. A lot about variables. So I think like, so for example, you might find when you're coding and you're just going to say, okay, I've declared this variable here in my function, and I'm going to try and use it in another function, but then it produces some sort of error, like it does says, oh, this variable is not visible, or let's see, well, let's open up our replit. I think we saw this like a little bit earlier, like, but right, I mean, really basically I have, I'm declaring a num2 here, so number 2 is equal to 2, and then I want to just try and print out like, let me just print out like system out print line, and then I just want to I'm going to run this double nums on, yeah, and so like basically I'm going to print out like the value, like the result of this double nums. Double nums is going to take, it's just going to take, I'll just do like 2 times. Right. Oh. Not so good at typing apparently. And I'm just going to return this. I'm going to say 2 times double num. And let's try and run that and see what we get. It's going to give you an error, even though like it seems like everything's fine, right? I have like 2 times number 2, like num2 is defined here. We're using it down here. But it's saying like, well, I mean, we're returning everything. That seems like right. But you know, the problem here is that like num2 only exists within this block of code. Like, so num2, this is one function, and this is like a second function. So any variable that we define within here is only going to be accessible within this block of code. So that's kind of like blocks of code. I think the best way to think about it is like blocks of code being stored in boxes. So like, for example, we have our overall, there's like 3 levels of boxes. So we have this overall, this big giant box. This is going to be our global box. And that's like our class. And we'll talk about like defining, we haven't done a variable in there yet, but we will. And then inside that we have, I have to like draw lines on here or something. And then inside of that we have our function. And that's like that could be like the main function or that double num function that I just made. And then inside of that we have like, I could say these are like blocks. And these are like, I think mostly I would say these are like if then statements, or like while loops, any kind of loops, while, for loops, any of that stuff. So any variables that are defined outside, so any variables that are defined in the global class, like say int num1, these are going to be accessible across everything. They're going to be accessible in the global class, they're going to be accessible in every function, they're going to be accessible in every block. So anything that's in the big box is going to be accessible in all the smaller boxes. But if I make like an int num2 here, 2 because I'm not creative, like this value is going to be accessible anywhere inside of this function, as well as any blocks, like any if statements or like the conditionals or the while loops inside of the function. So say function, and we'll just call this function. I should use like different colors, but too late for that. This is like function main. So int num2 is going to be accessible within function main and any of the blocks that are inside that. But if we have another function over here, running out of space here, maybe make this too big. We have this like function, I think we said like double 2. Then this number here is not within this block. Like these two functions are on the same level, but num2 is only available in the top function and not within the bottom one. However, in function double 2 down there, that this num1 is available, like because it's available across anywhere. You can see that anywhere. But yeah, because it's defined in the big main box. If we define a variable in here, and this might seem like kind of a like why do this? Like int num3, oof, really bad handwriting. Int num3 in there, it's only going to be defined within that block, and you can't access it anywhere outside. You can see this might be really worthwhile. Like, if we only have like 3 or 4 variables, we could just define everything in the global class. But the problem with that is, like, if you get more and more variables, like, you don't want to define them across the entire class if they're only going to be used in one block. So, like, for example, if we're doing like a while loop or something, or doing some sort of, yeah, probably like while loops make the most sense, we might want to use int I. Okay? So that variable int I is only going to be accessible within that block. So that means that if I do another while loop down here, or do another for loop, I could also use int I here, because this int I is only accessible within this block. So it's kind of only getting used there. So I can, in a way, reuse the variable in a different block. So So if I have like one while loop here and then another while loop later on in my code, I can use int I for both. That's totally fine. If I define int I instead of up here, instead of in this block, if I defined it within my global, then it's like I have to make like another. I have int I, int j, int k. I have to make all these different ints. But like, why? Why not just make an int I here, use it within this block, and then, you know, we don't need to see it across any of the other blocks, right? So, so the main ones we've seen probably so far. Although, like, as we start to do classes and objects, we'll see more global variables. But like, we've probably seen a lot of function ones so far. Yeah, so that's a really important idea, and it's why a lot of these things aren't going to work. It's exactly the reason why like this code isn't going to work, because we have int num2 here. It only exists within this function. It doesn't exist down here, so we can't access it. What we'd have to do here is we'd have to pass in that value. We have to pass in, I'll just call this like, we'd make this function take in a num, some sort of integer. And then here, instead of doing double nums, we need to send in that value. Because that's the only way that we can send this value and let it be accessible in here, is if we send it in as a parameter. So now if we run this, should be, hopefully, still problems. Oh, well, that's dumb. That might have been a problem earlier too. So we get 4. Let me just double check and make sure that was, let's delete this. Just to be clear, so we're at num2, and then we delete num2. Now if we run this, this should give us the right error. So you get like an error like this: variable num2 locations class main like cannot find symbol, because we can't find this variable. Like what variable are you talking about? Last thing, how are we doing on time here? Oh, 7 minutes. Okay, so one thing we could do here, and I'm gonna have to add in one keyword that you don't need to worry about, this static keyword. We'll worry about that much later on. It's not really that big of a deal. It just means belonging to a class. But if I did int num2 here, we'll say int num2, so I define my variable in my class. I'm going to say this is equal to 2, and then I really probably don't need this line of code, right? And then I probably just don't need this one. Now this is going to work. I hope. Yeah, look, it's going to work, right? We get 4 because num2 is defined in the class, so it's accessible in every function. So there's no longer any problems where it's like, what variable are you talking about? The variable got defined in the class, so it's available everywhere. Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of different examples we can look through with that. But you know, I want to kind of cut the video short here. Yeah, you see, right? All I did was just change where the variable's defined, and it's going to produce an error, can't find symbol. Switch back. It should be fine. Okay, so don't worry about the static thing right here. Not something you can see kind of popping up in a few of these. Not a big deal for us right now.